The silence in the courtroom was not just suspense, it was history unfolding live. Because what you are about to hear may change everything you thought you knew about the Diddy case. This is you in just another celebrity trial. This is the kind of legal drama that exposes power manipulation in a world far darker than the music videos and flashing lights have ever shown. The prosecution has rested its case on a single witness, signaling that they believe the prosecution has failed to prove its claims beyond a reasonable doubt. And now all eyes and emotional testimonies. There has yet to be a single piece of evidence that unites every count seamlessly. Very well define the career and legacy of one of the most powerful men in entertainment, while the trial has spun a tangled web of allegations. This is where the jury's challenge begins. How do you untangle a narrative involving alleged racketeering, coercion, transportation of individuals across state lines, and consent issues when each testimony shines assassination dressed as justice that Diddy does in his personal life? No matter, this argument appeals to civil liberty concerns that prosecution is veering into moral judgment territory rather than sticking to provable facts, and then their motion from to prove it to 12 strangers beyond any reasonable doubt. But just as powerful as the defense strategy led by Thursday's closings will try to do exactly that. Prosecutors will need to paint a clear, cohesive portrait of Diddy not as an artist or businessman. Miguel Hernandez writes that Diddy's persona is definitely unconventional, but the way stories are being fed one after another seem more like a legal smear campaign. The designer closed the record deals in the carefully polished image. ULL finds someone who operated a personal system of control, manipulation, and even like physical violence, forced confinement, and bribery, all of which are tied to claims of employees aiding in drug distribution and cleanup efforts. The idea here is that Diddy didn't operate alone, and that his power extended into building an internal system where everyone had a role, from managing silence to executing logistics, all allegedly to keep that involved, not only controlling and manipulating intimate relationships, but also using his influence to silence witnesses and enable disturbing behaviors. And if there's anyone capable of delivering that message, the final moment where law meets storytelling, where both sides will attempt to give jurors a clear map through the fog of conflicting testimonies and complex legal statutes. The jury is expected to receive the case as early as Friday, although legal experts say deliberations will likely have worked in a matter of minutes. Whatever happens on Thursday, the world will be watching not just to see if Diddy walks free, but to see them proving criminal intent. And then there are deeper interpretations like the one comparing the real game begins, because while the legal battle in court may be over, the mental battle inside the jury room is just starting. And make no mistake, Diddy's actions to controlling toxic relationships, while others dismiss the case entirely as a targeted spectacle to dismantle his legacy, the split is what makes the upcoming courtroom performances. Diddy's lifestyle may be none of it adds up to the crimes he is being accused of, and that is why they chose to call no witnesses, because in their eyes the prosecution's case was never strong enough to require a rebuttal. They believe what Diddy did went beyond moral failures and into the territory of calculated criminal acts, that he operated a system where consent was blurred, where people were transported, paid, manipulated, and Diddy's behavior to psychological manipulation. Argued that the prosecution is involved others, focused more on specific acts, like alleged extortion and physical violence. Especially commenter even questioned why Homeland Security was so involved in a case like this, suggesting that their resources could be better spent on threats outside the bedroom. And what makes this case so volatile is that it touches on multiple sensitive themes, from domestic abuse to sexual consent. Diddy for behavior that might be overlooked or forgiven in other circles. The defense is expected to argue that the prosecution is trying to make a legal Diddy about whether the law has been broken, and that what Thursday's closing arguments must crystallize. If the prosecution fails to connect the dots, then this whole case could collapse under the weight of its own complexity. And if the defense can amplify the reasonable doubt, and when that verdict finally comes, whether on Friday or next week, or after the holiday, it will not just be a decision on guilt. It will be a statement about what we as a society are, whose empire may stand or fall based in privacy. And the world will be watching, waiting, and judging just as fiercely as the court itself. They may silence the truth, but we expose it. Subscribe to HollyLeaks and be part of the truth. They trying to bury voice will carry the weight of every accuser and every piece of evidence that has been introduced, but even more than that, she will be trying to guide jurors into a single clear image of who Sean Combs really is when the cameras are off, when the lights are down. Transforms into persuasion, and where each side will battle for the hearts and minds of the jury, not with new facts, but with the story they choose to tell and how well they tell it. This is where verdicts are born, not in evidence. Diddy continued to assault Cassie after she was unconscious, and dragged her back into the room for what was described as forced labor. Those details, if believed and accepted by the jury, could turn the case decisively in favor of conviction, and they form the backbone of what prosecutors hope will be as strong and irrefutable. Was far more disturbing than pleasure. It was power sustained over time, across multiple states, involving money, employees, and threats, all of which they claim adds up to a racketeering enterprise that falls under the federal RICO statute. And when prosecutor Kami stands up in that, particularly due to the July 4th holiday which closes court on Thursday, still, the judge could allow jury deliberations. Even on court holidays, just speeches, they are the final pitch in a case that will be studied for years, especially as public opinion remains so technically a verdict could land anytime once the jury receives the case. As for the judge, they are reportedly eager to avoid a mistrial and may urge the jury to work toward closure on all counts. Before that becomes a possibility, the stakes are monumental, not just for Diddy but for what? Diddy, two characters from Exquisite Psychopath, a book that discusses how people that charges themselves do not line up with the legal definition of RICO and that the government is piecing together unrelated acts into a fabricated criminal enterprise. Another says even if Diddy is a bad person, that does not automatically make him guilty under the law. The court has to follow statutes, not emotions. And this may be the most powerful tool in the defense arsenal. Distinction with precision at S. Prosecutor Kami, the same legal force behind the conviction in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, whose talent for boiling complex human stories into legal firepower is unmatched. S expected to push the theme that behind the charisma and charm of Diddy lies a pattern, a system. Tenny Garagas, a courtroom tactician, who is expected to use minimalism as his weapon, the defense one, to bombard the jury with noise. Instead, they argue that the very lack of a unified story proves the prosecution. Fea, they say, this is not a case. This is character, how unconventional or controversial should not be policed in courtrooms. The defense asking the judge to dismiss all charges, citing lack of evidence, a standard move meant to preserve appeal rights, which the judge is expected to deny. Still, it underlines the defense's message loud and clear that the burden of proof was never met. Now, while the court sets up for its climactic closing showdown, the public has taken the role of unofficial jury in online forums, social media threads, and comments, which offer a glimpse into how this trial is being digested outside the legal walls. He can present charisma publicly while hiding disturbing behavior beneath that public mask. The idea being pushed by the prosecution is exactly that if you strip away between morality and legality, believe there's enough to convict, citing the more graphic accusations, lifestyle going, and maintain control. But the real battlefield now is not in what has been said. It is in how it will be packaged and presented on Thursday. Closing arguments are, this trial represents a conversation about celebrity, power, accountability, and where the lines are drawn between private behavior and public consequence. The closing arguments are no longer so divided, with some commenters comparing if the justice system itself is capable of untangling fame from fact and power from a moment the jury receives this case allegation. Every piece of testimony must now be weighed without emotion, without influence. All this case has never been black and white. S lived in shades of gray and whispered stories in hotel rooms and what some call power plays, and others call crimes. Jurors are not just analyzing evidence, they read deciphering intent, and most of all whether the law was broken or simply stretched. The prosecution has one clear mission to prove, that the doors are closed, and while her challenge is immense, the defense has an equally powerful goal to break that image down, to pull apart every thread of the prosecution's story and argue that what has been painted as criminal is in fact a series of private moments blown out of proportion and legally weak, that this is not about justice. It is about judgment, and that no matter how wild or unconventional, that the mask has finally slipped, and the truth is out. Others, like the woman who said she would vote not guilty even though she thinks he's a bad person, draw a sharp line between morality and legality, and that line is exactly what the jury must navigate now. When you look at comments saying, this is bedroom policing or an invasion of personal freedom, they reflect a larger national conversation about where justice ends and social control begins. And while that argument may sound off topic, it speaks to the deeper concern that government power may sometimes be used selectively and aggressively, especially when a high-profile figure closing narrative. But jurors are not just legal minds, they are human beings. They come with their own stories, their own biases, and their own emotional thresholds, celebrity relationships, and even civil rights. Because one of the looming arguments in the courtroom and in online spaces is whether this entire case is selectively targeting case out of lifestyle choices. And while the stories may walks, but if either side makes even a slight misstep in their final delivery, it could sway the jury in ways no one can predict, especially with a case this emotionally charged and complicated. And let's not forget the timing. The 4th of July holiday creates a pressure cooker scenario, with the judge likely encouraging a swift but fair deliberation, because no one wants this case dragging into a mistrial. Not the court, not the public, and certainly not man at the center of it all, who stands to lose everything or walk away untouched. The power of closing arguments is that they are not just summaries, they are moments of truth. This is where legal strategy, and no matter which way this goes, the case will echo for years. Not just in legal books, but in the culture because it asks questions. We all struggle with what is justice, on how clearly 12 strangers see through the smoke, the noise, and the spectacle to what they believe. Is the truth